one more thing about Messiah Lutheran Church. It's just a little trivia thing, and it's not really going to affect much, but that's the church I started going to when I was born. That was the first place my family went to until we ended up coming here when I was 10 or 11. But we had gone to Christ Mission at the time. It was Pastor Dave, I remember being there. The situation you're welcome to read this in the patch, it's all over our local news, is there was a person who had donated money over several years, but the money had been obtained fraudulently. And so the money needs to be returned. This is not the case that some court or judge is punishing Messiah Lutheran. The money needs to go back to the people it was stolen from. But the problem is, for Messiah Lutheran Church, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that have to go back. When the information first came, I remember one of their church leaders said, "Okay, we had some in the bank, but we don't have $500,000 in the bank just to give back." And so that's the reason why they were asking for help. He said there's been no even hint that something that Messiah Lutheran has done wrong. It's just the money had been given to them needs to be given back. So just wanted to talk about that. All right, we're going to be in Acts chapter 26 today. We're going to be going through this chapter. We're going to be talking about becoming a Christian. Last week, we asked you about talking to your families about Jesus. How did it go? How did it go? Did you have opportunities this past week to talk to your families about Jesus? Wow. Okay. I don't mind silence. And my goal here is to not make anyone feel uncomfortable. This wasn't supposed to guilt you or to make you feel better. Did you have opportunities this week to speak to your family? And again, your family, you have lots of people. Did you have opportunity this week to speak to your family about Jesus? How did it go?
My grandson James, he's in the Navy,
okay.
And he called me and asked me and Debbie to come down there and baptize him.
Nice.
Amen. So we're going to do that in 2 weeks.
There's actually nothing I can say to top that. All right. Praise God.
Amen. That just floored me, so what a blessing. And he said a lot of the guys in the Navy and in the training that he's in are asking him about Jesus. So it's just a blessing,
It's just a blessing all around.
Amen.
All right. That's amazing. Thank you, Al, for sharing that. Other opportunities you had a chance to speak to your family this week. I had one relative we actually got to talk about it over music. I was trying to prepare for the music we had today, so I was listening to it. And I got tired of it, so I started putting on Christmas songs. I put on a Mark Lowry piece, Mary, Did You Know? We're listening loud. Oh, and so we got to talk about it. Well, what does this mean to you? What do you think about this? And it was just to talk about God over a little piece of music. It was great. So God gives these opportunities. Sometimes they're going to be huge. And be prepared for the huge ones. Sometimes, from our point of view, they will be small. But remember, from God's point of view, He has been weaving and pulling things together. You're not going to know all the metaphorical threads and knots that He's done. One of the things I got to talk to my relative about with the music, there was what's sometimes called in music a tension note, where the choir was singing in dissonance on purpose. And then it resolved. And so we got to talk about what happens in real life when things are tension, and things are tight, and things don't feel, and then God resolves. And what that does, and how that makes your own life. That'd be a sermon for another time. So, we're going to be in Acts chapter 26, and look for these chances, look for these times to listen to people in your family, to talk to them, and to share with them. God will put them in your life. We're going to be in today in Acts chapter 26, and this is, do you believe? Do you believe? This is both for everyone here today, for those who are watching as this is recorded, for those who are here live. Do you believe? So we start in Acts 26. Paul is making a legal defense. He's actually under trial for sedition and for causing a riot. And he's giving his legal defense. And He speaks to King Agrippa. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? Seems to be an unusual legal defense. Do you believe the prophets? I know you believe. Then Agrippa said to Paul, you almost persuade me to become a Christian. This is in the middle of court. This is in the middle of a trial. And Paul speaks to the judge over it, King Agrippa, do you believe? So let's look at what happened up before this section where Paul tries to convince the people who are trying him to become believers, to become Christians. We're going to look at 3 sections he talks about. 1, do you believe? Do you have hope? Do you believe in the resurrection? It's one of the things that Paul will make this appeal to King Agrippa. Do you have hope? Do you have hope? There's more to this life than just what you can see, smell, and touch. Is there more? We will talk about forgiveness and sanctification. Forgiveness and sins is almost always wrapped up whenever we're talking about salvation. But it doesn't just stop there. My job out here today is not to tell you all the things you've done wrong, although sometimes it is. But that's just not where we stop. It's not just God gives you forgiveness for sins, which is huge. Please, no one think we are dismissing this whatsoever. But God just didn't stop and cut all the sins out. You know, the metaphor we take is surgery, where we cut everything away. Well, then what's left? Because there's also this piece of sanctification. We might use the word today, regenerate, where the body grows back better and stronger than before now that all the disease, all the sin has been cut out. So hope and resurrection, forgiveness and sanctification. But then it will also be very practical. What about suffering? What about when you see the world around you and you see terrible things happen? What happens about the terrible things in your own life? What happens if you say you're going to follow Christ, but you're suffering? What if you haven't decided to follow Christ and you're suffering? What does God have to offer? So let's look at those 3 sections today. So the hope and resurrection. So hope, resurrection, we're going to look at first hope. Acts 26, 6 and 7. This is Paul speaking. Now I stand and I am judged for the hope. No, you're not, Paul. You're being judged because you caused a riot and you caused an insurrection. I am being judged for the hope and the promise made by God to our fathers. To this promise, our 12 tribes earnestly serving God night and day. By the way, that phrase there is showing at this time. We here in the West, our day starts, we talk about our day being in the morning, we talk about day and night. Generally, our day starts at sunrise. We talk, technically at midnight, but most of us talk about day and night. Jewish day starts at sunset. So that's why that little phrase is in there. Serving God night and day. It's not a big deal, no theology there, just a little detail. Night and day, hope to attain. For this hope's sake, King Agrippa, I am accused by the Jews. So what is this hope? What is this hope that Paul is talking about? This hope is that when he dies, that's not it. That his life, he hopes, is more than just get up, go to work, pay the bills, go to bed. Get up, go to work, pay the bills, go to bed. Get up, go to work, have a little party, then go to bed, pay the bills. There's more to life. His hope is that there's more than just this physical world that we see. I sometimes run across the philosophy, naturalism is simple. That only thing that exists is what I can see, smell, taste, and touch. Really? Really? That's simpler? That seems to be such a diminished way of looking. The hope makes this life richer. The hope that what we are doing has longer effects than just right now. That what you are doing, you can have influence for centuries, for millennia. Because the next kingdom, the hope in heaven, is huge impact on your life. What you're doing is having an eternal impact. The people you interact with, every human that you be with, your family, friends, neighbors, the stupid person who cut you off on the car while you were driving, maybe not so stupid. They have long-term lives. They keep living. We are going after they die. So that person who cut me off, who I'm very, very angry at, I have to remind myself, this person's going to live a long, long, long time. And am I helping them be more like heaven? Or am I helping them be more like me? What influence am I having on their life? This hope that Paul speaks of animates what he does. Because now my actions have long consequences. So this hope. Now wrapped up in this hope is this word resurrection. For those of you who have grown up in the church, who have been following God, this is a word you hear all the time. Oh, the resurrection. The resurrection's huge. This breaks all of our human rules. When we talk about the horrible tragedies right now in Ukraine or in Israel, let me ask the simple question to show where I'm going, how resurrection breaks our normal priorities. What is the terrible things that are happening right now in Ukraine and Israel and Palestine? What's happening? What are they? No trick question here. Just what are they? Okay, there's some persecution, war, and the war leads to death. We also know there's rape and wounds and assault, but death. We say, oh, the war is terrible because people die. The worst thing that's happening is dying. And some people might get philosophical, some things might be worse than that, but death is held up as the worst things we humans could do. Resurrection comes along and says, nope, not that way. If this is the only world that there is, then death is the worst thing that can happen. But we say there's more. There's more. The influence you can have on somebody can exceed death. The things about following Jesus and being a follower of Christ, you can do things greater than death. That should give you pause. When you say you believe in the resurrection, when we Christians tell non-believers the resurrection happened, please be aware of what you're saying. You're saying that all the normal human things don't follow anymore. Because there are times you see people do either philosophical, or you even see basic teaching kids how to drive cars. Okay, you lost control of the car, and you now are going to crash into something. Crashing can make the fewest number of deaths. We use death as a standard in the world all the time. The resurrection comes along and says, nope, there's something greater. There's something bigger. And so Acts 26:8, Paul says to King Agrippa, why should it be thought incredible by you that God raises from the dead? For those who have challenged the resurrection over the centuries, there's a phrase, some extraordinary event. It has to have extraordinary proof, because if the resurrection happened, it's extraordinary. Yes. Yes, it is. One of the things that we have as Christians, we say the resurrection actually happened. We don't mean as a mythology, once upon a time in a land far away, there was a pretty prince, and the people didn't like him, so they crucified him. That's not our story. Our story is a poor carpenter went out and told the truth of God, was crucified, and came back to life at 33 AD in the spring. You can look up the exact date, I don't remember, but look at the movies, let's see the exact date. That this happened on this date. This resurrection actually happened. It is a historical basis for what we do. It's not a once upon a time story. We say the resurrection really happened. And it has an impact ever since throughout humanity. Why would you think it's incredible that God raises from the dead? If there is a God, if there actually is a creator who designed and made the fine-tuning of the universe, why should he be surprised that at one point he says, tweak, I want this one back. It is completely consistent that the Lord of life, the one who flung the stars, created the universes, the one who created the galaxies. Sorry, too much Marvel in my head right now, too many Marvel comics. One universe, multiple galaxies and the stars. Why would it be incredible that one guy would go, this one comes back. Death cannot hold this one. Death should not hold the rest of you, and I will show it by raising this one. Resurrection should not be considered extraordinary. Now, granted, when's the last time you saw a resurrection? Okay, we know it is not our normal experience, but we don't serve a normal God. We serve an extraordinary God. And for those of you who don't believe, this is what we're offering for you. Come join us and serve this extraordinary God, because he will do extraordinary things. Now, he will not obliterate the normal things in your life, but he will help reorder them. But there are some extraordinary things awaiting you if you come follow this God. Now, there's more to this life than we can see. This is a concept that we run into. I said some people will argue that this is all there is. The material world is all there can be, no supernatural. And I would ask a question about that. I'm actually basing this when Jesus had this conversation with Nicodemus. He says, if I try to tell you about natural things, you don't believe me. Will you believe me when I talk about supernatural things? So, there's more to life than we can see. So, how many of you have trouble with the idea there's more to this world than what you personally see? Ask that question again. How many of you have trouble with the idea there's more to this world than what you personally can see? Now, I realize for some of you, I'm being a little selfish. How many of you have glasses? One day. If you have glasses, you are painfully aware. I really hope there's more out there than what I see. Because right now, you're a bunch of blobs. I see blue blobs, and I see a red and gray blob. And so I really hope you're not a blob. I hope there's more to you than what I'm seeing right now, because if we just base the world on what I think I see, on what I touch, what a tiny little life. There's far more. Now, for those of us who accept that God is supernatural, there's more out there, think about when you're trying to persuade somebody else. Now think about this from this physical as an example. How would you convince somebody else that they are colorblind? We know colorblind exists. We know colorblind affects 5% of the population. We know that the eye has rods and cones. Rods sees light and dark. The cones see the color. There's normally 3 types of cones. And for some people, they only have 2. Occasionally, they only have 1. And so for some people, they don't see all the colors. But how do you convince someone who's colorblind that they're colorblind? Nate, I asked for your permission on this one ahead of time. How did you learn you were colorblind?
Uno.
Uno. For those of you who don't know, it's a card game. There are 4 colors in Uno. There's a red, there's a green, there's a blue, there's a yellow. And you either have to match the number or you have to match the color.
And I kept,
So what happened in Uno?
so we were playing some classroom game in school, and I kept getting, everybody thought it was funny, but I was putting the red cards on the green and the green on the red. And the teacher thought I was messing around, but I was like, I'm not. I don't know. I can't, to this day, I can't see it. Obviously.
And what's funny about that Uno game, Uno was made in Joliet, so it's a local game. For those of us who are here, it's a local game made here. And it's if you match the color. It's a simple, straightforward game. It's got a couple little nuances to give it a little more interesting gameplay. But the red and green, I mean, some people will have, the blue and the green sometimes get a little faded over time. But red and green, these should be stark colors. These are Christmas colors, right? We see the difference between red and green. And to someone who's colorblind, they looked the same. So how do you convince someone who's colorblind? And you say your teacher thought you were messing around. Can't imagine that Nathan would ever misbehave in class.
Pretty typical.
But imagine now you're going to try to convince somebody supernatural is real when they can't see it. Try to imagine how convincing someone they're colorblind, something we all know and accept is real, but they can't see it. Are you gaslighting them? Are you lying? Imagine how they would feel. Now imagine the same way. Now you're trying to convince them the supernatural, but they don't see it. There's another idea that's now being currently tossed about. I said, the eyes, use them as eye picture. Rods and cones, and the cones, most people have 3. Well, there's a few cases where some people have 4. 4 types. They see more colors than the most of us. It happens to be called tetrachromat for 4, tetrachromat. There have been a few documented cases where there's people who see more colors than the. Now, how do you prove that? How how do you prove that this person sees more colors than what I'm seeing? It's not normal. So how do I prove this thing? And again, I'm not interested in proving. I just want you to think about that. Just from the natural. How do you convince someone who's colorblind there's colorblind? How would someone who sees more colors than normal convince all the rest of us that they're not making it up? That they're not crazy? How would they do that in such a way that we can understand? Now, my argument is the vast majority of people you interact with, you have no trouble accepting, yeah, there's people who are colorblind. And there probably are some tetrachromats out there. There probably are some people who see more to the world than I see. Most of us don't have a problem with it. We are painfully aware of our own limitations. And for me to say everyone must see the world the same way I see it, I know that's, I see that my own. I actually have a different amount of rods in each eye. This eye does not see color very well, whereas this one does. When I do this, most of you are gray. I see grays, whereas this one sees color. If I can't even believe my own two eyeballs. Color. Imagine me trying to convince you your method is wrong because I see gray with it. We don't want to come off that way when we're telling other people about Jesus, when we're talking about the miracles of God. Be gentle with it. Think in the same way. You have been blessed to see 4 colors. How are you going to talk to someone who's colorblind? Be mindful of your own words. Think about the hope that is within you. Wrap that up that you have this hope. You've got a gift. You've got this hope. And not everyone has that hope yet. Okay, let's move on to forgiveness and sanctification. God gave Paul a mission. And he explains this mission to his judge, King Agrippa. Acts 26:17. I will deliver you from the Jewish people, his own people, by the way, as well from the Gentiles to whom I now send you. What he's saying is, I will rescue you from your own people, and I will give you a mission with new people. It's a phrase I hear commonly used. You've got to find your own people. You have to find people who think like you, act like you, talk like you. I don't know what I think about that. But that is what the mission God gave Paul. You have to leave your family. You have to leave the people you're used to. You have to leave the language you're used to. You have to leave the customs you're used to. And I'm going to go send you out to have a mission with somebody else. This is part of what God has for each of us. He has a mission for you. And yes, I'm biased towards that word because this is Christ's mission, church. God has a mission for you. He has people he wants you to talk to. He has places he wants you to go to share his kingdom. So what is this mission? One of the things wrapped up with it is forgiveness. Acts 26:18, to open their eyes, to turn them away from darkness to light, from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and an inheritance among those who are sanctified by faith in me. It's very easy for me up here to talk about sin. It's expected, the pastor is going to talk about sin. But it's something I should ask. When I start talking about sin, how does it make you feel? And there's more than one right answer here. As adults, we often feel multiple things. When I start talking about sin, how do you feel? What's your thought? Okay. Uncomfortable. Makes you uncomfortable? How do you feel when I say, okay, I'm going to start talking about sin? How do you feel?
Try to deflect it. That's not my sin.
That's not my sin. You're not talking to me. Please don't talk about my sin today. Okay. And you have been in the church. You know you've been saved. You know you've been sanctified. But yet if I start talking about sin, you get uncomfortable. Now imagine doing this to a non-believer. The gospel is still true. I'm not making it, not asking or wanting you to think about any changes to the gospel. God saves us from our sin. But keep in mind, when we're talking to other people about sin and unrighteousness, it's going to make them feel squeamish. It's not going to make them feel happy. They may have numbed themselves because too many people have talked to them about sin. They don't want to hear it anymore. But forgiveness is something that God gives. It's one of these gifts, forgiveness of sins. There are those of us who are aware of our sin. We're aware of our shortcomings, and so to have this message that God offers forgiveness, this is good news. Some of us wake up early in the morning with, oh gosh, I missed this again. I forgot that again. Oh, why did I do? I'm aware of my sin. I'm aware of my shortfalls. God offers us His grace. The other thing, though, that's tied up with sin is this being unspotted from the world. We read that the James, one of Paul's compatriots at the same time, warns multiple times to don't be spotted from the world. He warns about sexual immorality. He repeats himself in James 1, in Acts 15, in Acts 21, where James talks about beware of this sin. It's like, okay, then what do? What's the message? Beat yourself up more? Make yourself more controlled? Make yourself more rigid? Don't do this, don't do that. That will make it better? It's the power, the word we use is sanctification. It's the power of regeneration. In many ways, this ties back to hope. We're talking about serving the Lord of life, that God came down and raised Jesus from the dead because He is in charge of life, and life is greater than death. When He talks about sanctification, I said the word regeneration, God is saying He is greater than your sin. The sin that you find infecting and spreading through you, God's bigger and can take that out. God can take that out and have you start growing again, living again. That you can have a fresh start without having to resort to amnesia. We're not having you forget what happened in the past because we don't want you to make the same mistake again. Remember. But God can make it so it is no longer what's in charge of your life. This is a great message. This is something you can have to tell other people. You're not here to tell them because you did this wrong, you did this wrong. God can work with that. God can make you into a better you. God is in the job of making you into a better you. He wants you to regenerate. Looking at my time, I'd like to move on now that we talked about hope, resurrection, the impact that should have on your life and how you talk to other people, to forgiveness, sin, sanctification. I really think that emphasis should be on regeneration. It's a powerful thing that God has in us, changing our life into something good. But what happens when we run into things that aren't good in our lives? What happens when people suffer? This is a hard question that has haunted humanity for thousands of years. What do you do about things that suffer? What do you do about pets and animals who are suffering? What do you do about people who are suffering? What about this suffering? Acts 26:23. And this is part of Paul's defense. That the Christ would suffer. Jesus himself, when he walked among us, suffered. That he would be the first to rise from the dead, and he would proclaim the light to the Jewish people and to the Gentiles. By the way, we read earlier that there's an inheritance. In order for there to be an inheritance, legally, there's really only one requirement. There's lots of other things that can happen. If you give an inheritance, there can be tax requirements, there can be tax shelter. But in order for there to be an inheritance, one thing has to be true. No matter where we are, human history, laws, in order to be an inheritance, somebody has to die. In order for there to be an inheritance, someone has to be dead. And so when Paul's talking about this inheritance we get from God, and we've said that before in the church, oh, we have this rich inheritance from God, this grace he's given us. We are saying that God has to die. That the Lord of life, the creator of the universe, chose to die. And it wasn't a pretty death either. This wasn't a nice death surrounded by family and friends. Don't we always hear that? Oh, they have a peaceful death. That's not the death Jesus went through. It was a suffering death. It was an agonizing death. And not just that moment. We know that when Jesus did his ministry, there was suffering. Following Christ means that we too will suffer. Following Christ means that our suffering will have meaning. This is part of the hope that we have. This is part of the regeneration that we can offer. That yes, suffering will occur. Nowhere in Christianity do we say, oh, come follow God and you will have no more suffering. That's false. Talk to the believers in Ukraine right now. They are suffering. Talk to some of our missionary friends in India. They have suffering. But what the difference is that God offers in the same way that I struggled and suffered and died and turned it into something glorious. Your sufferings too can be turned into something glorious. They are not just random events that fell on you. Not just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. God can take these, picture we mentioned earlier, the threads and the knots that God's using, and turns it into something beautiful. I gave a musical picture of the tension and the discord. All those terrible things, and God will take those and turn them into something beautiful. When Paul says that the Christ would suffer and be the first to rise from the dead, we too will suffer if we follow him. And God will turn our lives also into something glorious. So now we have a task. We have a mission. God calls us to proclaim light. You are called to be light bringers. Some of you, I know by personality or by training, are predisposed to see the world very pessimistically. You see all the terrible things that are happening. You see the world as a dark place full of evil and crime and brooding. Okay? And some of you I've argued with. I'm not here to argue with you today. If that's how you see the world, God's calling you to do something. If you see the world as an evil place, filled with darkness and wrong, God has something for you to do. You are to be a Christ follower, bringing the light into that dark, evil place. You are not here to fight the evil with more darkness. You're not here to be more clever than the evil around you, but you're here to bring light. So if you are the personality that you see the darkness around you, maybe that's God saying, hey, I want you to bring my light there. I want you to bring my grace there. If you are holding out on believing in Jesus because you are stubbornly holding, well, because there's evil in the world. Well, what evil is it? What is the specific evil that causes you to argue with God? I would challenge you to ponder that and think on that. What is that evil that bothers you? What about that evil is bothering you? And is there actually God whispering in your ear, I want you to do something about it with me? If the problem of evil is weighing on your soul, ask yourself, what is that specific one? And is the reason why it's still at a latch on you because God actually wants you to go do something about it? I can't stand this particular thing. Okay, what can you do about it? Is God calling you? Is there a reason why that echo is in your soul? I ask you to look at your soul and ponder that and think, this may be where God's asking you to bring his light to make a difference. Well, I can't. I'm not asking you to change the entire world. But I am asking you to consider, what could God do with your life? I have hope that if you see that problem, that God has something he wants to do, both inside of you and outside of you, to change the world you're living in. So I'm going to end with this. Do you believe? Ask the music team to come back up while I close here. Do you believe? Do you have hope there's more to this world than what you can see, smell, and touch? Do you believe that the resurrection actually could happen, that it did happen, that it should change how you live today? Do you know you've been forgiven? Do you live as if you're forgiven? Or do you live as if you are still guilty? Do you live as if still you're just waiting for someone to beat you for what you did wrong? Are you acting like a dog? Do you know you've been forgiven? You've been set free? Do you believe you've been sanctified? Well, I may not be doing those terrible things anymore, but I'm just kind of, God's got good things for you to do now. Do you believe you will suffer? When bad things happen in your life, are you shocked? Oh, I can't believe this horrible thing. I just got over this last horrible thing. Now you're suddenly another. God told us this is going to happen. Do you believe you're going to suffer? Finally, do you believe that you can bring the light? Do you believe that there's a way that the life around you can be better, that God can actually step in and let you be the light in the darkness? This is what God has for you. King Agrippa, from Acts 26. Do you believe? All of you listening, do you believe? Do you believe the prophets? I know you believe. Then Agrippa said to Paul, you almost persuade me to become a Christian. And Paul said, I would. I would to God that not only you, but all who hear today might become almost and altogether such as I am, a follower of Christ, except for these chains. That is my ask for you today. Come, serve the Lord. Let him give you hope. Let him forgive you your sins.